Right, hey guys, how are we doing? Back into the video from Annie News. We got some more Overlord movie cut content, and I'm intrigued by the title. How Demiurge broke Ainz with this impossible task. Demiurge is a genius, but we all know that, when Ainz has the master plan, it's Demiurge that's come up with it, and Ainz just goes along with it. So I wonder what Demiurge tried to throw into place here that threw Ainz. Let's find out.
There's always going to come a time when Ainz couldn't live up to the person his subordinates wanted him to be. Ainz had done all he could to prevent that from happening, but with the way those who adored him kept elevating him higher and higher, a tipping point was all but inevitable. Well, turns out that point was right here in the Holy Kingdom,
Oh, damn.
leading to a mental breakdown unlike any we've ever seen before.
No.
I'm talking a full-on collapse where Ainz falls to his knees and can't take it anymore.
Oh.
Most of the time we'd find something like this comedic, but this time the reason behind it is actually quite sad.
Huh.
When you see how deeply it is Ainz is burdened by the expectations of those around him, you start to look past the jokes and feel only pity. I mean, the guy is literally in pain and he isn't even supposed to feel pain.
This is mental. How can he cut something like that out? Anime onlys are never going to see something like that. That's insane.
So, if you want to know what it is that pushed Ainz past his breaking point, then stick around as this will probably be the most important cut content so far. Part 12. The Impossible. Finally, we find ourselves outside the building the orcs were being kept in, a place guarded by paladins unsure as to what to make of them. It was the moment they saw Ainz approach that all knelt before him in a show of respect. It was a clear indication their reception towards him was getting more positive.
Yeah, definitely. Like, they've seen him help. So it's like, we appreciate that.
Ainz would then usher them to continue with their other work, but because their orders were to stay and guard this location, Ainz had no choice but to take that back. It was an unintentional ad-lib that I'm sure left him quite flustered. It was when he and Nea proceeded to enter the building after that Nea couldn't help but wonder why it was the orcs were brought here. If it was a predicament that affected not only them, then Nea felt perhaps they could rally the support of numerous demi-human tribes. Perhaps this could be the turning point spurring them to fight against Yaldabaoth. First, she needed to look past the fact that they were orcs though, since up until now, all they were enemies to be hated. Invaders she villainized as the attackers of her country. It was when she heard the sounds of a child crying and a mother trying to calm it that's when Nea was forced to consider something she'd never even thought of.
Oh.
Despite them being orcs, they too lived a life the same way humans did. So, knowing such made the conditions they were in all the worse, as the environment they were kept in was filthy with blood, vomit, and excrement. It was a disgusting prison unfit for the tidy race the orcs were known to be. Now, Ainz's entrance was met with significantly more fear, as the sight of an undead caused many of the orcs to panic. Ainz would attempt to command them to shut up, but a fierce order like that was met with even more panic. Their pleas for mercy echoed twice as loud now. This, of course, only went to make Ainz frustrated, leading him to punch the door with what seemed like all his might.
Oh.
I mean, it was an impact strong enough to bust the door right off its hinges and into the hallway.
Oh, wow.
Naturally, silence came after, so Ainz would then tell them not to make any more outbursts. It was a stern warning that worked to keep the room silent. Ainz would then say what we saw in the movie, telling the orcs he'd come to free them.
Right.
The thing is, even Nea, who struggled to read the faces of demi-humans, could tell each and every one of them were thinking this was a lie. So, Ainz would request a representative step up to speak for the orcs, leading to the conversation with DL. At first, he didn't say a word, leaving Ainz confused as the whole point was to have a discussion with him. That's when Nea would remind him he told them to shut up, clearing up the confusion and progressing the conversation a bit different from what we saw.
Right, okay, so he's told them to shut up, they're scared. He tells the person to talk, and then they're like, well, you said to be quiet, what do you want me to do? I don't want to die.
You see, the first thing Ainz asked was not why they were imprisoned, but rather if DL noticed anyone among them whose personality changed. That or if someone acted like they were someone else. This was probably Ainz looking out for shapeshifters, a concern we know he was having from last episode. It was when DL responded no that's when Ainz would probe into what they were doing here. We know they were prisoners for not following Yaldabaoth, but they were also definitely subjects of Demiurge's vile experimentation. Like, not only did Ainz's question about it shock them to their core, just the mention of what happened spurred some of the orcs to start vomiting. So, whatever it was Demiurge did to them, it definitely didn't follow the Geneva Convention. Now, their reactions had actually left Ainz flustered, perhaps even guilty, as a clear change in attitude could be sensed from him. There was much more compassion in the way Ainz spoke now, almost like a parent trying to comfort a kid that one of his children made cry. Such was an observation from Nea, a surprisingly spot-on one considering the circumstances. So, Ainz would then ask if they needed anything, a question to which they chose to answer very modestly. All they wanted was to not talk about what happened.
Right.
They knew they would have to if Ainz ordered it, but if that was the case, they at least wished to discuss it where no one else could hear. That's apparently how traumatizing Demiurge was to them.
Damn.
In fact, when the topic of fighting against Yaldabaoth came up after, DL was quick to dismiss it as even an option. Where before they would have fought for sure, now they couldn't even fathom it. Everything
Like
the
it's not
demons had
possible
put
to
them
them,
through
yeah.
left them broken. The orcs had no courage left to do anything. We know they just wanted to get as far away from Yaldabaoth as possible, but the reason they refused to go with Ainz is because to them joining an undead meant becoming an undead themselves.
Oh.
It was clear their mindset was no different from Nea's when she first met Ainz. So, even when Ainz mentioned how he had quite the diverse population of demi-humans, DL refused to believe that this was the truth. To him, there was no way an undead could
Just
be the
can't be
spare and
possible
just
to them,
ruler
yeah.
to the living. The thought of it was just too unfathomable. That's when Nea would step in to tell them otherwise, statements Ainz had no problem with up until she was about to talk about his monuments. This absurd passion had come off as strange even to the demi-humans, leading DL to ask if she was being mind-controlled. It was a question to which Nea could only respond with first-hand knowledge, saying how everything she herself saw was everything the orcs could ever want. Though her time there was brief, everyone she saw didn't carry the same expressions of panic and fear the orcs were wearing now.
Yeah.
It was then that Ainz would chime in to say why that was, basically explaining that everything he rules belongs to him. And if one of his subjects were to get hurt, then that meant one of his belongings were damaged. So, by submitting to Ainz, you were effectively becoming an extension of him. A position that would be treated with the respect worthy of such. By now, DL didn't find Ainz's offer too terrible, but to make such a decision wasn't something he could do on his own. The idea of safety was quite tempting though, especially since defending themselves against the demons wasn't going to be possible. So, as Ainz saw the orcs leaning more towards his offer, he would reiterate that taking it would result in his full support as their king. With so many different types of people living in his lands, Ainz made it clear all he wanted was for them to work together. Such was a statement that led Nea to question why her own kingdom wasn't like that, a thought she immediately got an answer to. The reason Ainz could accept anyone and everyone was because of his power. He alone made the peace between his people possible. And just as she expected from a ruler as just as him, despite the orcs not even being his subjects yet, Ainz would still send them off with enough food and even soldiers to support themselves. It was an act of generosity Ainz hoped would spread the name of the Sorcerer Kingdom, perhaps even get more demi-human tribes to defect with. Now, Ainz would tell Nea to leave due to him performing some sort of secret ritual, a request she understood but struggled to accept. Reason being that to be left out like this felt lonely. Nea couldn't be sure of what Ainz was doing, but with the way the number of orc breathing noises decreased rapidly, she assumed it was Ainz using his teleportation magic to get them out of here.
Right.
I couldn't tell you why Ainz wanted to keep it hidden either, but I imagine it had to do with keeping Nazarik's gate system a secret.
Alright, maybe, yeah.
This brings us now to the scene with Caspond, elder brother to the Holy Queen Kalka, or in his own words, the brother whose clever little sister got ahead of him. An introduction like that didn't sit too well with Remedios, since to her it seemed like a nasty remark of sorts. All she could do was lower her eyes, though, as Ainz and Caspond would spend an awkward few moments just staring at each other. The reason such a pause was even taken was because in meetings like these, usually it was the superior person who offered the handshake. That being the case, you would think common sense indicated an actual king was superior than someone in line to be a king, but as Nea suspected, she figured Ainz had waited out of respect. We don't know whether that was actually his thought process, but to Nea she felt that this was Ainz being modest and open. It was a gesture that even Gustav couldn't help but appreciate, nodding in admiration for Ainz's consideration. In the movie, the conversation would end there, but in the novel, the two would proceed to discuss what happened to Caspond.
Right.
I'm gonna save that topic for the next video, though, as that alongside Caspond's discussion on how to take advantage of Ainz are all precursors to the battle from the next half of this arc.
Right, damn.
Before that comes one of the
There's
most
so
important
much
cutscenes
left,
so
isn't
far,
there? Which is
revealing the
unreal.
extent to
Like,
which
I don't
Ainz
know
is
what's
involved in
left
all
out,
this.
but
To
he
a
said
certain
this
degree, it
halfway
covers a lot
2
of what's
episodes
said
ago.
during this scene here, but the timing in which it takes place is actually before the siege. It's a change that fully recontextualizes Ainz's plight here, reducing the impact of his suffering at the hands of DEMIURGE. So, with the city about to be retaken by a force far larger than any of the paladins expected, Ainz would literally crumple to the floor out of stress. With each and every interaction building upon his mental exhaustion, Ainz was now at a breaking point where he couldn't take it anymore. He would fall to his knees and cover his face with his hands. All he could think of was what he was going to do next, as the instructions DEMIURGE had given him weren't very specific. Just as we saw in the movie, the script DEMIURGE gave was go with the flow.
No.
It was a plan that effectively meant just ad-lib everything. Ainz felt he had done so pretty skillfully, but the amount of ad-libbing he had to do left him upset.
I was gonna say, it must
Like,
be a
if
lot.
he was truly the brilliant person DEMIURGE thought he was, then Ainz knew he could play the role of the Sorcerer King perfectly. It's because he wasn't and even considered himself below average that Ainz's confidence was in the gutter now. In fact, this whole topic was actually a great point of contention between them. Believe it or not, Ainz had actually gotten into an argument with DEMIURGE.
Oh.
He would firmly request DEMIURGE write him a plan that was far more detailed, only to be met with the infallible logic that doing so would insult his intelligence. And because DEMIURGE would never make a mistake so grave, no matter how Ainz pleaded, he wouldn't budge.
Right, yeah.
What would cement his defeat was when Albedo came in and agreed with DEMIURGE. So, go with the flow was all Ainz had to work with, leaving everything related to him up to him. Whatever DEMIURGE was doing in the background, Ainz had to navigate it the same way he would do a maze blindfolded, constantly second-guessing whether his choice was the right one. So, with such a fate being the result of the trust and respect DEMIURGE had for him, there was nothing Ainz could do to fight back. He could tell they thought whatever he did was far better than anything that they could come up with.
They have so much
A
faith in him,
precarious
it's
situation
unreal.
that left him praying to whatever god might be out there. Now, normally Ainz wouldn't mind as much if DEMIURGE or Albedo just played to his strengths, but the fact they never did made all these impossible tasks suck the motivation right out of him. Luckily, all that was coming to an end though, as all he needed to do now was make it past the climax, the middle stage DEMIURGE had prepped for them. This was definitely going to be the hardest part for him, but once finished, Ainz knew the rest would be easy. What about it made it the worst? Well, it was the fact DEMIURGE was planning to attack until 85% of the city was dead. Ainz didn't feel any way in particular about
Whoa.
these casualties, but it was the
Whoa.
instructions alongside it that really got to him. You see, Ainz had no qualms having any of these people die. If DEMIURGE thought 85% was best for Nazarick, then that to Ainz was better than any number he could come up with. In fact, if a higher number was better, then Ainz thought, why not kill more? So, clearly 85% casualties wasn't the problem. What was DEMIURGE's ask for a list of those he shouldn't kill. Reason being that this wasn't just a list Ainz could make up with random people. No. What DEMIURGE requested was specifically the names of those who worshipped him. He wanted to know everyone Ainz had convinced to come over to their side.
Oh.
To Ainz, this was his worst nightmare, but for DEMIURGE, it was a task he felt Ainz could pull off easily. Just as easily as he did with Gondo Firebeard. Ainz, however, had no one, leading him to panic as this was yet another impossible task he was given. The key difference between this one and all the others, though, is that Ainz couldn't BS his way out of it. Like, not only did Ainz not have a single person who worshipped him, he could feel the intense hatred a lot of the people of the Holy Kingdom held towards him. That being the case, the predicament he was in now came from both sides. There was no way he could overcome the challenge of winning the hearts in the Holy Kingdom, and there was also no way he was going to give DEMIURGE a list without a single name on it.
Yeah.
So this was by definition
so
Ainz
awkward
stuck
and annoying.
between a rock and a hard place. His stomach hurt from the idea of not living up to the lofty expectations Demiurge had placed on him. Even a partial list would have sufficed, but to respond with not a single name at all was just far too embarrassing. It was clear the luck Ainz had with Gondo skewed Demiurge's perception of him. Where Ainz believed that to be a nat 20 he was never gonna roll again, Demiurge saw it as a feat that was easily replicable. What Demiurge didn't see, though, was that when it came to Gondo, this was simply the stars aligning. It just so happened Ainz would stumble upon him in the caves, and it just so happened that Gondo would be this abundant source of information,
Just
allowing him
dead
to strike
lucky.
rich with the other dwarves. Perhaps if Ainz had someone like Gondo in the Holy Kingdom, then perhaps things might be more in his favor. It's because he didn't, though, that Ainz was finding himself in a panic now. Now, I'm sure you're all wondering why he isn't considering Nea, but the reason for that is because he believed the extent of their relationship was that of acquaintances. Nothing more. You see, to
She definitely worships him, though. That's mad.
Ainz, all he'd managed to do was get on friendly terms with her.
No.
He did give her that
That's
magic item to deepen
crazy.
their friendship, but with Nea always looking at him with the eyes of a murderer, Ainz couldn't tell how effective any of his advances were. So it's for that reason he figured he couldn't expect much from her. Plus, even if he did write Nea's name
So
down,
unreal.
just imagining what Demiurge would think when he only saw one name was
One
incredibly
name.
painful.
Yeah, that's mad, yeah.
Like, it literally made Ainz feel pain. To think he was about to shatter Demiurge's expectations of him physically hurt.
I
Yeah.
don't think, though, that Demiurge would... The way Demiurge works with responding to Ainz, he would just be like, well, everyone else is a fool then, and this person must be absolutely magnificent for worshipping you. You know, he always spins it in like a positive towards Ainz.
Tried to tell Demiurge he wasn't as smart as he thought before, but whenever he did, Demiurge never believed him. It felt like Demiurge just kept placing him on this ever-growing pedestal. A vicious cycle that made living up to his expectations even more difficult. So, sooner or later, the end result was always going to be a situation like this. A predicament where winging it wasn't going to be good enough anymore. Ainz then thought maybe it was best to let Demiurge know he wasn't as awesome as he might think, but his reaction to such a revelation left Ainz terrified. Like, if the roles were reversed, Ainz knew he'd be upset for sure. He could only imagine what emotions he'd feel had his boss ruined a deal he'd worked several years on. This is why Ainz was so stressed now, because it wasn't just about not being able to provide the list. It was about not reaching a conclusion that was satisfying. With the way he was headed now, all roads led to Demiurge being disappointed in him. Ainz actually explains it with quite the good analogy, saying how he'd climbed so high that if he was to fall now he'd take too much damage.
Wow.
He'd tried lowering himself by constantly reminding them he wasn't great, but even as his plans failed right in their face, they still somehow found a way to make him look
That's
amazing.
exactly what I'm saying, yeah.
I mean, even now, one of Ainz's plans was failing spectacularly. To highlight this, Ainz would pull out a normal sword with runes carved into it, a weapon with just as much power as Nea's bow. The runes didn't actually do anything, but as a weapon created with what Ainz described as Yggdrasil tech, one can only imagine it was better than the average sword. So, Ainz had prepared a number of these weapons, fully intent on lending them to the people of the Holy Kingdom. He then planned to hype them up as powerful rune gear only made in the Sorcerer Kingdom, their feats made clear during the battles against the demi-humans.
In all fairness, so there was obviously a lot more mention in the original source material of these weapons. It did work as a little funny comedic side story with the, you know, at the end where it's like the weapon to kill the boss and, you know, giving the bow to, you know, it worked as a nice little comedic side bit.
It was after that Ainz hoped to advertise them as finished products, one more people would want to get their hands on. This all depended on Nea though, as the bow he gave her was supposed to be the catalyst which would start this runecraft type. It was when no one came asking for anything though that Ainz couldn't help but wonder where was it he went wrong. The bow was certainly flashy enough to catch people's attention. He figured he just needed to make Nea fight on the front lines with it. So, yet again, Ainz's plans were falling through, further solidifying the point that he was nowhere near as amazing as his subordinates thought he was. It's when you think more about it that this whole situation is actually quite depressing for him. I mean, Here Ainz is struggling to meet the expectations of those far more capable than him, and when he finally has the confidence to come up with a plan of his own, not a single part of it plays out the way he wants it to. Perhaps if it did, Ainz might feel a bit better about himself, but if he can't even meet his own expectations, then how could he hope to meet anyone else's? It makes the adoration everyone else feels towards him all the more painful. So much so that you start to think, how much longer can Ainz keep the charade up for? It was then that Ainz would hear a knock, bringing us to a cutscene with a doppelganger. We don't know who this doppelganger is, but based on the details of his conversation with Ainz, we're led to assume it was someone in the room from this scene here. We of course know it was Caspond, but as a novel reader that's not confirmed until later.
Oh, wow.
As for what the two needed to talk about, it was to answer the question Ainz had been dreading this entire time. Who was it that DEMIURGE needed to spare? Who did Ainz convert and want to let live for this upcoming siege? Ainz would circle the room thinking frantically of what to say, his emotions constantly being suppressed every time they almost overwhelmed him. It was once time seemed like it was running out that Ainz decided to just speak frankly. He would say there was no one in the city that needed to be saved. DEMIURGE was free to thin them out as needed.
Thin them out as needed.
That's how Volume
Damn.
12 comes to an end, leaving the story on a pretty big cliffhanger. Now, for me, this whole scene was probably the most important because it really highlights where Ainz is at as the protagonist. It kind of boggles my mind that they decided not to include it.
It's crazy.
I'm of the mindset that if you're not going to show the impact the events of the movie have on the main character, then why bother to show the movie at all? I'm probably just being a bit dramatic, but I really do feel like this reflection with Ainz was pretty important. But anyway, that's pretty much it for this episode. So
Madness.
if you liked what you saw and want to see more, then be sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Until next time, though. Ciao.
I mean, very valid point. If you've got moments that really affect the main character of the story, why not put that in? But hey ho, still interesting stuff. I love seeing what was left out. I really enjoyed the movie. It feels like so long ago now. And there's still more. There's still more. Absolutely unreal. And we'll check them out as they come out. Thanks for watching.